All this is Keanu Crouch with lesson 5 of implementing the vulnerability scanning methods. This is part of the cohort for the Cyber Defense and Countermeasures course, C842 or D340 of Western Governors University. So tonight we're going to go through lesson 5, implementing vulnerability scanning methods. And with that, we're going to go over the lesson objectives of understand industry regulations, explore vulnerability scanning concepts. We're going to review security baselines, understand special scanning considerations, and review operational technology, which can be applied to ICS SCADA, which is something that may be more generally known as. So with that, we're going to go ahead and just jump in. During this cohort, we're just going to kind of give an explanation of what each concept is speaking about, each paragraph is speaking about, give some industry experience based off what it's speaking about, and give kind of a synopsis of a better way of understanding what that concept is speaking of. So we'll just go ahead and jump right in. So there are 3 topics within this lesson, 5A, 5 Bravo, and 5 Charlie. First one we're going to jump into is explaining compliance requirements. Compliance meaning this is related to the specific industry of the information technology network that you are all working in and that the network is serving. So first we're going to talk about the relationship between regulations and standards. So regulations and standards are tightly integrated. Regulations are your legal requirements as an organization to abide by certain guidelines set in place in order to protect whether it be consumers, the public, or customers or employees. These are things that are put in place in order to generally protect someone from a legal standpoint to ensure the organization is doing things properly. And we have standards that are kind of like a baseline to abide by to ensure even if you're not legally required to do something, you do have some type of instruction in place to ensure that you are um, kind of doing your due diligence when it comes to your computer network, when it comes to your cybersecurity, when it comes to your business operations and practices. So first, we have the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST. You'll see this a lot if you work in government organizations. NIST 800-53 is something that I have a lot of experience with. Experience from a standpoint of going through NIST 800-53 line item by line item and identifying those controls in the organization and ensuring that we are abiding by those controls. So it's non-regulatory. So essentially, you cannot, as an organization, be brought to court for not following a NIST guideline, but it is something to, to place into your business operations to ensure that you have some type of control over your security operations. Um, it has a wide variety of guidance and best practices within the field of information technology. So one of the things that NIST does provide to the industry is if you are new to an organization and they do follow certain NIST standards, that is kind of one of the first places you can go to verify that your organization is doing the proper things, and you can kind of reference for the best way to best secure your organization. But you can also bring it up to your whoever your leader is that this is non-regulatory, meaning this will not send you to court, but this is something that we should put in place as a best practice across the industry. We also have the International Organization for Standardization, which is actually backwards in the acronym of ISO. One thing to remember ISO standards is if you would like to go look at ISO standards, they are not free. You are not able to just go and just download them. If you can, it's probably an old one. Organizations or individuals may get a copy of them and just post them out on different um, threat feeds or forums, things of that nature. So you may be able to get a copy of it. But if you wanted to just go grab the newest version of the ISO 27K, it is there is a cost applied to it. So one of the cool things about it is This is something that is actually used across the industries, is also as well as across geographical locations. Um, ISO is something that you should not get confused with OSI. As far as OSI, the seven-layer model is two different organizations, but they do serve the same kind of focus in terms of understanding information technology. ISO is more focused on security. OSI is more focused on understanding different models and how we can best apply our those same understandings to practices across the industry. As far as kind of think of it as the same dialogue and language when it comes to OSI and ISO. Think about the same practices when it comes to security. So when we talk about regulations and standards, so we use legal contracts to require standards to compliance. So when we think of legal contracts, one of the easiest ones to bring up is PCI DSS, where we will get into later. That's when we are talking about financial organizations. We're talking about any type of transactions going, whether it's consumer transactions, organization to organization transactions. Anytime you put your card data into a website of something of that nature, or you're giving your bank information, something that can personally identify your financial accounts. That's also our stock market trades, things of that nature. All of that has to be applied. PCI DSS has to be applied in those situations in order to protect consumers and protect organizations and ensure that we are protecting financial data to the best of our ability. And we are not just trying to make money and not protect the data behind what makes us the money. This is ensures that card data is not stolen due to a lack of due care and due diligence on the part of the business, ensuring that encryption is put in place, ensuring that information, data retention policies, information is not held for longer than it should be held for, or for purposes that it's not used for. Um, we also have the Center for Information Security benchmarks. So they're a set of best practices, which also is not a regulation. So this cannot be something that can be used against you in a court of law. This is something that is used by organizations to best secure their networks and implement best practices across their industries in order to fight kind of an ongoing fight of information security. This is something that can be put in place. So if you're starting from a bare bones environment, or if you're starting with an environment where you do not have a really robust security posture, you can implement a lot of these free standards in order to best protect your networks based off of what is happening in the industry. OWASP is well known, Open Web Application Security Project. It's a nonprofit foundation, so it works to improve the security of web applications, or just think of it. I wouldn't always say web applications when it comes to OWASP. That is kind of is what they started off of, but they do provide tools and tips based off of just securing applications in general across the spectrum. It does not have to be something that can be found on the internet. So don't take web application for kind of scripture as this is always going to be web application. I would look at it from the standard of just application. We went over PCI DSS just now. So the capability maturity model, it describes the five levels of maturity. So we think about the five levels of maturity. The term maturity, we're talking about how secure or how far they have gotten in ensuring that their environment or their operational capability is ready for external use, external facing, operational practice. How secure are we and what level are we? We have the certain processes in place to ensure that people are not, or adversaries are not um, gaining access or malicious activity or compromising based off of us not having the processes in place to ensure that if something were to happen, we can combat against it. And are we combating against things that are not happening yet from a perspective of um, kind of a secure baseline, a secure starting point? So as we're getting into the cloud security domain within the world, obviously cloud has to have some type of standard for organizations to follow when they're deciding to transition over to the cloud space. And that's where we bring in the Cloud Security Alliance STAR certification. So it's a registry that details cloud providers that have achieved their certification, and it basically ensures that those organizations have put measures and processes in place to protect their networks and protect their cloud capabilities against actions of malicious activity that are taken into the cloud space, which differs from the standard enterprise space that we are generally used to within this field. Then we get into the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. This is something that is legally binding. This you'll see this a lot if you are signing up for some type of social media account. When a lot of people question why when you're signing up for an account, they say like, why does it ask me if I'm 13 years or older? That's kind of weird. And it's because this is something that is held up in a court of law, and the age of 13 is what was applied to the law. This protects children from using certain things, certain applications. This ensures that the organization that is providing this social media platform has protections in place to protect children. Um, this can get very gray when it comes to who is using these applications and how they're using these applications. This protects illicit activities on those applications and ensures that children can be protected. And if someone was to do something on those applications that is targeted toward a child, COPPA would get involved, especially if a control was not put in place by the organization in charge of the application to prevent that child from being exposed to things they were not supposed to be exposed to due to their age. And finally, we have the General Data Protection Regulation. This applies to international business, specifically business with Europe. Um, the GDPR is kind of very, I won't say the term disliked, but I just said it. This is a regulation that is applied to any organization that decides they want to do business with Europe. It is much more stringent than things that are put in place within the United States, and it requires those organizations to put controls in that are more stringent based off of what the European government has put in place as to how they want to protect their citizens. The seven principles of GDPR are lawfulness, fairness, and transparency, purpose limitation, data minimization, accuracy, storage limitation, integrity and confidentiality, and accountability. GDPR takes these things very seriously, ensuring. So, for instance, if we bring up transparency, there is a certain amount of time where if a breach occurs, that if the organization does business with the European market, they have to ensure the consumers that are covered by the European regulations have to be notified. And if that time frame is broken without any type of exception or policy put in place, then there will be consequences for the organization. This also goes into place where we have organizations that tend to hold on to data for purposes that are not specifically outlined in the user agreements or longer than what it is necessary. GDPR will come down on those organizations. The European market has kind of a tight hold, and GDPR is very active in any new technologies put in place, and they closely monitor those markets for any types of breaches of their regulation. So, Open Web Application Security Project. So, OWASP tends to fall on the side of open source technologies, but it can be used for closed source technologies, things that you have to purchase, things that are not just openly available. But in order to maintain the community model of OWASP, it does tend to err on the side of community based projects. So it's basically a standard that allows software developers, web application developers to understand how to best keep their software and their technology secure. It creates awareness of those community models of certain vulnerabilities. So if an organization decides to make something open source, this can be tested against the OWASP, the well, the whole project itself to ensure that that organization is not releasing a product that is um, exposed to certain vulnerabilities. One of the main things about OWASP is if you decide you want to make something open source to help the better community, it will be pen tested by subject matter experts across the world, across the industries to ensure that when organizations are adopting these applications, they are in the most secure form. So think of it from a standard of how organizations such as since Linux as itself is open source. If one of the things that makes Linux one of the most secure operating systems is the fact that it's open source, I don't have to pay for it. I can actually get a copy of it and I can actually pen test this application, this operating system myself. I can make better versions of it. I can change it and I can put those changes that I've decided are better into the community for the next person to take and build off of. One thing that you're going to learn a lot within the information technology security realm is we are sitting on the shoulders of giants. Essentially, someone has created something in the past and we build upon that. So we have new eyes, we have new mindsets that focus on these things, focus on the security of these things, focus on the operation, how we can make it more efficient, how we can make it more secure. And OWASP essentially took the security aspect of the open world and it turned it into a project. So essentially, it takes all of these different ideas and takes all of these different findings and it puts these into a centralized location. So when you want to get into the field, you can basically learn what things have been, what have been, has been done in the past to better create a product that can be used in the future. So as far as the OWASP projects goes, there's the OWASP Top 10 that it essentially publishes the top 10 vulnerabilities found out in the wild that you should watch out for when you're creating your projects or you're pen testing your applications or you are building upon something that's already there. And within these 10, so they have the top 10 for 2021 here, which are broken access controls, cryptographic failures, injection, insecure design, security misconfiguration, vulnerable and outdated components, identification and authentication failures, software and data integrity failures, security logging and monitoring failures, and server-side request forgery. So one of the things that as a future cybersecurity analyst such as yourselves should do is try to ensure that you are checking into what OWASP is working on, the things that they are releasing, subscribe to their top 10 that comes out every year, and ensure that your everyday practices are not subject to vulnerabilities that exist within their top 10. It's kind of like one of those things like a checklist, like, okay, these are the things that are going on in the industry and in the field right now for the year, for the time I'm working in this field, working in this organization. We look into some of the things that are happening and see if I can protect my organization because there may be a red herring in one of their OS top 10 because if you actually look at some of these top 10s, they break down how some of these attacks are happening out in the field. You can apply those to your organizations and ensure that you're protecting your organization against some of the top 10 attacks that are happening out in the world, out in the wild, must I say. So OWASP, since it is a project perspective, they have multiple different aspects of how they actually approach um, application security. So the first one we're going to talk about is Enterprise Security API. It's an application security standard. So it focuses on APIs. If you subscribed or you came to the previous cohort that I talked about how APIs are the link between two different applications on the back end. Think of it as a pipe that allows two applications to talk without human interaction. So ensuring those APIs, the API linked together is secure is very, very pivotal to the success of a secure organization because if you're having some type of communication on the back end that cannot be interacted with by a human, you have to make sure it's secure because if an attacker can identify a vulnerability in your API, You may not even be aware of this vulnerability, nor be aware of the exploitation of this vulnerability. And it may take a while because you are just assuming at that point that the API is configured properly. So with the OWASP ES API, this allows you to ensure that your APIs within that you're using within your organization, that you're leveraging from other organizations and trust relationships, have the proper hygiene to ensure that the things that are not interacted by you on a regular basis are still secure. Then you have OWASP Mod Security. It protects web applications against malicious traffic. So this can be something such as essentially, if you think of a website or web application, you're going to be pen tested by the world at every single possible chance. They're like people scan, people have the right to do so. It is the open internet. The open internet, unless you are a government organization, a highly secure government organization, you really don't have a whole lot of protections against people just scanning what you have that's forward facing. Mod security ensures that you have those certain controls in place to identify this and mitigate any type of risk that can come from people just trying to pen test your open space. It's allowed. Well, it is a gray area as to whether it's allowed, depending on the type of organization you are. But one of the things that you're not going to get away from is whether it happens or not. Because even if it is illegal, are you going to catch them? Do you actually know the physical person that is pressing enter on whatever attack is going on? Mod security assists you by um, publishing controls that are put in place so you know if it happens, am I protected against it? WASP parse open, it's used to look at structured content, things that are already completed, data feeds, documents, and web pages that have a lot of data on things that you may be an organization that is built off of just providing data to consumers. So parse open will allow you to look at that data, analyze it, break it down, understand what vulnerabilities exist in this data, and ensure that your data structure is protected against attack. Open Crypto Audit Project is based on organizations that use encryption in order to protect. So if you think of OWASP, think of it as like I don't know, I live in Texas, we have HEB. The HEB's got everything you can need from lawn chairs to it's like the Walmart of Texas. OWASP is like the Walmart of security for web applications or applications in general. So you might think like, okay, I've implemented encryption, so now I'm secure. It's like, okay, is your encryption implemented properly? We have a product for that, and it's open source. So when you look at OWASP, you have to think of an organization that is here to protect the greater good of security, the greater good of information technology to ensure that we are secure going forward. That's OWASP is your product for that. So the Center for Information Security Benchmarks. So it's a robust set of practices for the secure configuration of IT systems and applications. So where OWASP is more focused on essentially applications, CIS started with internet security, but then it's transformed to an organization that assists with protecting everything. So they have like a little bit. It's not a de facto standard, but it does have information on any type of application that you have in your organization. So within CIS, we have core benchmarks. Benchmarks can be associated with the industry or product or specific practice that you use within your organization, and they are designed to be flexible to meet the needs of different organizations. So this is not something that you're just like, okay, it doesn't apply to me because I don't use this one benchmark. No, it does apply to you. Find how it applies to you and ensure that you are using the benchmarks provided within CIS to secure that specific aspect of your organization. One thing that can help secure your organization in the future from your roles is the diversity of your threat feeds, your regulations. Be diverse, the diversity of your implementations and your applications. Want to make sure that you're taking a little bit of information from a lot of different sources and not just relying on one. And that's how you kind of build this super thick firewall against the active community because when you get out in the wild, there is a lot going on. So the best thing that you can do is diversify your portfolio of security standards, regulations, and controls, and protect your organization. They're different CIS benchmarks, and kind of they're if you notice they're actually industry aligned. So, for instance, the CIS benchmarks that WGU may put in place. So I don't work for the cybersecurity department, but I would assume that they put in place education benchmarks for K 12 and higher education organizations. So they basically look at what types of controls can be put in place for an educational institution. Whereas you might look at an organization that's just a standard office building. They might just put in enterprise benchmarks. But you don't want to look at it like, okay, I don't have anything that's hosted on the internet, so this doesn't apply to me. There is a benchmark that's applied to your organization. You just have to ensure that you are actually not just looking at it for what it says, but actually understanding the subsets of the benchmarks and how you can best utilize this for your specific application. So an organization might say, okay, I am an ICS SCADA organization. So what the energy utilities benchmarks doesn't apply to me because I'm not a power plant, but does the enterprise benchmark apply to you? So it also applies to energy utility companies, but it may not apply to like ERCOT, things of that nature. Think like large organizations that actually control utilities or on the large scale, but you may have an ICS SCADA application within your organization where you can reference the CIS benchmarks in order to better secure that organization. So one thing of note with CIS benchmarks is they are living documents. This is not something that you're going to look at, and the last update was in 2013. This is something that as new developments come out in the industry, the documents are updated. So if there's a 0 day, the 0 day obviously will go through certain channels. Obviously, most likely CISA will get it first if it's a part of the 16 critical industries. But once it's kind of gone through that gambit of validation that this is a real threat, there will be a CIS benchmark that comes out there will be a CIS benchmark that is updated with security controls that go against that specific attack. So this is something that you just don't check when you first start working in an organization, or you don't check like one time like, okay, I checked it at the beginning of 2019, so we should be good for CIS benchmarks. It's like this is something that you want to add to your diversified portfolio of different threat platforms, different threat feeds, and you want to make a plan and possibly do it quarterly, possibly if you have the manpower to do it monthly, where you check these different feeds, these different organizations to say what is current, what is happening, and how can I best secure against it. And they're also good reads if you're kind of into information technology and cybersecurity. It's also, even if it doesn't apply to your industry, you may just peruse from time to time just to kind of increase your understanding of what's going on. So, payment card industry data security standard. This is very important to all of us that are consumers in a capitalistic environment. Protecting your money, protecting your financial data. This is something that applies to the business itself, and this is something that consumers are actually worried about because this ensures that your card data, your bank data, your investment data is not being compromised. This is very, very important. And if you work at a bank from a cybersecurity standpoint, you will be well versed in PCI DSS, especially if you are in a field that deals with point of sale technologies. You will be able to read it and facilitate this thing from start to finish. So there are 12 main requirements of PCI DSS, and essentially they are applied to which step in kind of the setting up of a financial transaction data network and the maintenance of a financial transaction data network. Each portion of it kind of has different subsets that ensures that there are certain controls. So when it comes to PCI DSS, you want to ensure that encryption is in place. One of the main things is encryption in place at data at rest, data in transit, data in use. Encryption is really huge when it comes to financial data in terms of especially how the economy is going right now. If you notice when markets change, things change like that, certain crimes occur based off what's happening in the world. And PCI DSS, based off of today's environment, has been at the forefront of kind of a lot of the attacks that have been occurring. Even with some of the geopolitical attacks, some countries, when we talk about sanctions and things of that nature, you will notice if you work at some of these organizations that are applied to PCI DSS that your workload will increase based off of geopolitical or economical events that occur out in the world. Each requirement out of the 12, it details many individual controls, and implementing them is a complex task. So it's not like, okay, protect all system gets lost in unauthorized access. I put a password on it. No, there's going to be subsections under that specific control that basically add in the phases of ensuring that you have properly implemented that control. Those phases are assess, plan, execute, and maintain. Assess, have you done it properly? Have you figured out what is necessary? Are you doing that? Plan how you're actually going to implement that control. Put in the control and then ensure that that control is running properly. So if you have some type of encryption and the encryption breaks, do you have a fail open setup? Or when it breaks, is it something that's just going to break and then people are just allowed to just have data go across and it's not encrypted? Are you doing that so you ensure that your organization never has a outage? Is that in accordance with the PCI DSS guidelines? Are you allowed to do that? It's like one of the things that happens. A lot of consumers get mad when they go to an organization like, "Hey, our card machines are down," but then they never think about the aspect of maybe the card machines are down because there was some type of instance that required maybe a change, and basically before they could actually implement that actual production environment of that change, the execution, they had to complete the plan. So let's say there was a breach. Okay, we're not going to allow card transactions right now. Consumers will get mad, but that's how I will be in compliance with PCI DSS. So there are always second, third, fourth, fifth order effects of cybersecurity incidents that from a lens of a consumer, you may not understand it, but when you start to get in this field as an analyst, you may be at the forefront of why Target does not allow cards today. And a lot of it comes from ensuring that we are in compliance with the regulations put in place, especially when we're dealing with transactional data. And the second, third, fourth, fifth order effects may make you mad when you get off of work, but then you kind of think back, like, you know what? I know why they do this. Something may have happened today. And until they can bring this card system back up, there's controls that they have to put in place, and they have to test these controls, and they may have to be signed off by some type of, it might be a legal requirement where they have to be signed off by a lawyer where he says, okay, y'all now meet the requirement, so now you can turn your servers back on. Once the encryption starts again, the keys are spread out, then you can start accepting card data again. So that's just like kind of another way to look at why PCI DSS is so important and how this actually applies in your everyday life. But it'll then apply in your everyday life when you're on the other side of the spectrum as an actual cybersecurity analyst, depending on the organization you work for. So we're going to get into vulnerability scanning methods. This is just a video. I recommend you watch the video. I'm not going to play it here in the video because I'm not a fan of video and video. But we're going to start getting into how we can best secure our environments against attacks that are known that we can actually scan for and put in mitigation methods based off of our business practices. So assessment scopes. So when we talk about assessment scopes, what are we looking at and how do we want to look at it? What level of fidelity do we want to get into the network when we conduct some type of vulnerability scan? So internal versus external scans. The best way to explain internal versus external scans is where is the scanner coming from? Is the scanner a part of the domain within the network, or is the scanner sitting outside of the boundary? The scanner sitting outside of the boundary will tell you what the internet facing environment will see. An internal from scan from the internal side of the boundary will give you more fidelity, but it also has access. External in some organizations may be more important. Depends on what type of organization you're in and how many people are trying to attack you. You want to see what the front of your house looks like. Is there a window open? Is the front door unlocked? Is the garage open? But then when we talk to internal scans, we want to know, okay, if someone has made it into the house, is the safe password 1234? Is the safe, is there like a specific vulnerability to that safe where you can just tap on the front of it and it'll just pop open? So it depends on what fidelity we want based off of where the attacker sits. And that is all based off of the idea of what risk are we trying to mitigate. So vulnerability scans. So it's essentially a certain type of software. If I want to give you some type of examples, one of the de facto standards in vulnerability scanning is Nessus. Within the organization, they call it ACAS. I do not remember what the actual acronym for ACAS stands for within the DoD, but essentially it is the DoD version of Nessus. If you want the open source version, something that you all can go download and use yourselves, it is called OpenVAS, VAS, Violet Alpha Sierra. So essentially, that is a de facto standard of what most organizations use for their vulnerability scanning. The vulnerabilities are produced into the environment, the threat landscape. They are added as specific signatures to look for by these scanners, and these scanners then run within organizations or external to organizations to see if the organization is vulnerable to a specific exploit or compromise. So when we talk about scan, we have credentialed and non-credentialed. It's just as the name says, password or no password. Do you have the password? So the reason why we want to check both of these aspects is we want to see what a malicious adversary can see by just brute forcing pen testing from outside the front door. Okay, I don't your front door is locked, your garage is closed, your window is closed. But if you have, let's say you have one of those devices where your front door is 1, 2, 3, 4, it's a non-credential scan, but maybe your scanner allowed you to kind of just brute force soft passwords that are used. So with that, non-credentialed scans, I have the password. So with the password, I can actually go in and I can actually check to see if the safe is closed. I can check to see if the weapons are locked up. I can check to see certain things that I would not be able to see from the front door with a non-credential scan. Generally, organizations want both. Non-credential first, what can the outside see if they have no access? Credentialed, what can I see from the inside if an attacker has already gained access to the network? How secure is my network once someone is in the house? Someone comes in the house, but the safe is locked. They can't actually get the keys to the kingdom because there are controls put in place from the internal portion of the network that protects me from further action if an attacker gains access to the inside of the house. Agentless, is there something on the machine itself that is conducting the scan from within internal to the host? Or am I sitting back at a server and I'm reaching out to the machines and I'm conducting certain activities? So generally it is based off your business operations, what your organizations allow, and the sensitivity of the devices that you are scanning. I will say from experience, more sensitive devices do not allow agent scans. They do not allow agents at all. Because when we talk about ICS schedule, we'll talk about in just a moment. Very sensitive devices that sustain life or transactional data, things that cannot go down, things that cannot be interacted with. Normally, organizations will not allow an agent to sit on that because they want those devices to be as bare bones as possible to prevent the risk of a crash. Agentless, and where you'll see when in those sensitive organizations, essentially it sits back at a server. You might have an ACAS server, or thank you, Joseph, for putting in the explanation of the acronym to ACAS. ACAS is Assured Compliance Assessment Solution. So they might have an ACAS server within the network, but it does not actually sit on the machines. They don't have agents that they reach out to and sit on the machines. That ACAS server will reach out and essentially just imagine it poking and prodding at the system, maybe going to the door, checking inside, and then coming back out. It is not leaving anything on the device. Agents, just imagine there is a scanner within the house, and you call them on the phone, hey, look at these different things. And then when you're done, go sit back in the living room. You're still there, you never leave, and you can query that agent whenever you need to conduct maybe a short scan, maybe you want to something comes out really quick, but it's not a specific kind of large scale reason why you want to conduct a scan out of your schedule, you might want to contact those agents and say like, hey, just do this quick scan, look for this specific vulnerability, and then when you're done, just kind of go back silent, but you're still present there. So active versus passive. The best way to look at active versus passive, active is you are actually interrogating the machine itself. You're talking to the box, you're doing things on the box notices you're there. The system notices you're there. Passive, when you hear passive in cybersecurity, the first thing you should think of is always going to be network, PCAP, things that you can do without the machines even knowing that you're doing them. The second form of passive scanning, their passive interrogation, is offline logging. So, like offline logs. If I could get all of the logs from a system, just download all of those, and then I can take them and plug them into another system, and it can look through those logs to identify if an attack happened, that is still considered a passive scan because I'm not actually on the machine looking through certain files, looking through certain um, logs, looking at certain applications. I'm not actually interrogating the machine. I'm just downloading information and doing it offline. Active, I am actually interrogating the host, I am interrogating the server, I'm interrogating the network appliance. Passive, I am doing this without the actual system knowing I'm doing this because I'm doing it offline or I'm doing it in band of the actual communication without the communication at two ends knowing I'm doing this. So the criticality ranking, this refers to how serious the actual vulnerability is that comes out that needs to be scanned for. Some are obviously more serious than others. Some things may be like an info, or some things may be like a high or a low based off of what the actual secondary effect that can come off of the scan, or that can come off of if an adversary was to exploit that specific vulnerability. That's kind of how criticality is ranked. If the attacker was to exploit a vulnerability, they would have control of your whole network and the world would end. That will probably be pretty high. If an attacker was to exploit this vulnerability, they would just know the name of your server. That will most likely be an info. So it's not something that you will want to conduct a full out of schedule scan of your whole network, start shutting stuff down, interrupting business operations. You might just want to be like, okay, the next time we do a scheduled scan, take a look and see if this is there. If there's a chance that you have a specific device or specific piece of software, application, network compliance on your network where it says like, we just identified this as a thing, if this is exploited on your network, you will have to buy a new network tomorrow. That is going to be a high. That probably needs to be done at the earliest convenience. Depending on how bad it is and the type of industry you work in, this may be a standby call if it is something that it is that critical to your actual business operation. This may be something where you're sleeping in your bed and the CISO gives you a phone call like, hey, this just came out. CISA just released this. I need you at the building like 5 minutes ago. So it depends on how bad it can actually affect the network or your business operations after exploitation of the attack, which determines the criticality ranking. So mapping, enumeration, and scope. So there are specific tools that can map out your network. One of the things that can um, hurt organizations is a term coined a rogue device. The reason why mapping is very important is because you have your network is networking, you're doing business operations just fine, and you think everything's okay. Someone comes in, they plug in a device, or they get on the Wi-Fi network, and they are now a part of your network, but your security tools don't know they're there. Your vulnerability scanner doesn't know it's there. Your cybersecurity analyst doesn't know it's there. He's hanging off your network, and he has access to everything. But this device is not actually part of any of your asset control. The way you actually combat that is mapping it, enumerating your network, understanding what is there, the things that are not supposed to be there, and anything else I need to know about it. I need to quarantine, I need to cut it off. But the only way you're going to do that is by mapping out what can actually talk on your network. So that's a different type of vulnerability scan, but it's normally part of the vulnerability suites that we purchase where we can identify kind of what's supposed to be there and is it there, and what's not supposed to be there, and also is it there. Um, this kind of turns into the scope. So when we do scans, a lot of times we scan a specific set of IP addresses. But in order to do kind of a mapping, we want to scan a subnet. So let's say we have a slash 24 network, and we're supposed to have 254 hosts on that network, 253 hosts on that network, and we scan the network. But let's say we scan the network for a slash 24, but we know there are only 124 hosts on it. But we've actually specifically identified all of those hosts, and we haven't actually put it in a subnet. So there could be 136 hosts on that network, but we've scoped it into just what we know of. A better practice may be to just do it as a slash 24. Scan the whole subnet, see what else pops up. Something might start talking, and you're like, gotcha, you shouldn't be talking right now. I don't even know what you are. At that point, you have scoped your network. You actually know what's there, and you actually know what should not be there. That way, you are building a better security posture, and you may have identified a specific attack vector where an adversary has just popped on your network a rogue device in order to attack your network. So understand vulnerability analysis methods. We talked about it just now a little bit with map and discovery scans. Identifying what's there, is it supposed to be there? Identifying what's not there and why it is not showing up, but my asset management roster shows it should be there. Device fingerprinting. Are the devices that are there what they should be? If I'm supposed to have 15 Linux devices and I have 14 and I have one extra Windows device, did something get re-imaged? What is actually out there on the network? If something is identified as a rogue device, what is it? What type of device is it? There are certain ways that Windows hosts respond to certain types of scans, and Linux hosts respond to certain types of scans. IoT devices respond a certain type of way. Like there are ways that tools can identify what the device is based off of the way it talks back to the scanner. These things have gotten really robust now in 2023. Like years ago, everything would be Windows or Linux, but now we can get down to what operating system, what version, and what patch level based off of how it responded to the scan that was sent out to it. So we want to get a fingerprint to identify what this thing is. Is it supposed to be there? Let's say every device in your network is supposed to be on Windows 11 because your organization has decided to do a tech refresh. A device responds back as a Windows 10 device. That is the reason for investigation. Why is this thing responding back as a Windows 10 device? Everything supposed to be Windows 11. This device supposed to be there? If it is supposed to be there, why did it not get the update? What is actually going on here? But these things spur conversations that can help you identify those gaps in security and kind of close those gaps. Excuse me. So static analysis. So static analysis is a type of passive vulnerability scan where we are identifying vulnerabilities in logic in our code. Also, when you think of static analysis, think of identifying our business processes. Also, think of inspection of our algorithms that allow our systems to talk to each other. We are looking at inconsistencies that can be exploited in order to take advantage of just a mistake by a software developer. Um, One thing that you always notice in your careers is software development guys and security guys never really go to the same water cooler meetings. They don't really go to the same off work events. They are one in each other as far as being in the same industry per se, but it kind of has gotten to the point where now secure DevOps is a role because these two parties don't really talk to each other that much. So one party wants to make something efficient and easy for the consumer to use and achieve the business goals, where one party can seem to be against that whole idea and they want to make sure everything's secure. So what can come out of that is code that allows for compromises. And the example here, the problematic approach, is basically saying the first one is saying if the user is not an admin, they give them limited access. But just meeting that, then they would have if the user is not an admin, give them limited access. Outside of that, just give them whatever they want. That is a bad way to look at that. That is considered bad logic. So the second term is if admin is true, then give them privileged access. If else, don't give them any privileged access. That's kind of the way you want to do it. Your if else statements should be kind of kick them out. And this kind of falls into setting firewall rules. How a lot of these concepts will kind of align together that you'll notice in your careers. Firewall rules can kind of come to this the same type of logic where if the communication does not meet any of these higher firewall rules, then block it. Meet the rule or don't. And what happens a lot of organizations is they don't want to break stuff, so they'll put all these firewall rules in. And in the last rule, will basically be like, if else, allow. And she was like, okay, you might as well just turn the firewall off. Like you put all these rules in, but then you don't want to break something, so you're just going to allow things through, and that is not conducive to a more secure environment. So dynamic analysis, it uses vulnerability scanning software in a more vigorous approach. It basically allows you to poke and prod at specific products put out to identify if there is an error that exists that allows you to get privileged access, that allows you to do compromises. This is something that generally you will need permission, written permission from a legal standpoint in order to do. These are your purple teamers, your red teamers. These are your guys that kind of go in and specifically try to break stuff in order to get in. Please make sure you have permission because if something happens and you didn't get legal consent that is written and the organization wants to come down to you basically saying that you did not do something in accordance with their contract, then you can actually get in a lot of trouble for it. Fuzzing. Fuzzing comes into place when you want to just try different things and see what works. It's kind of like if you ever heard someone say, throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. That's fuzzing. You just try a different type of inputs, multiple different types of inputs, and see what response you get. And this can be used as a way for input validation for web application. This can be a way for you to just see what users and passwords. So like think of fuzz if you want to look at it from a password perspective, you try a bunch of user names and passwords. Brute forcing and fuzzing are kind of one and the same, but they're just applied in different ways. You just try a bunch of stuff and then let's see what happens. Let's see what we can do with the access that we had. So reverse engineering, one of the things that is actually a big issue when it comes to reverse engineering is organizations are taking software that is proprietary, reverse engineering it, deconstructing it, and identifying how it works in order to make an attack for it or make something very similar to it that they can patent and resell. Reverse engineering is just taking what is there, breaking it down, decompiling it, figuring out what it does, actually finding holes in it or figuring out a way to duplicate it. So compliance standards and regulatory requirements, this kind of goes into what we talked about earlier when we talked about the difference between regulations and standards. There are ways you can actually scan for specific compliance when it comes to regulations to ensure your organization is safe. There are a lot of companies making products that do this to try to automate kind of that legal safety. This is not something I will rely on. This is just a piece of the overall the structure that you have in place. But this is something that can when I talked about diversifying your different applications, your different software and security controls, this is where compliance and regulatory requirement scans come in. So device hardening, reducing the attack surface, those are one and the same, they are synonymous. Essentially, do you have things on your systems that should not be there because it has no specific use case in your organization? At the same time, do you have things on your personal computer that have no use case and should not be there? If it is not necessary for your operations to run, you most likely want to remove it because though maybe those applications are not updated as much as the applications that are used generally. So the things that you don't use that are just there because you just never removed them, that can just be a door. Imagine a door on the house that is not it's not checked to make sure it's locked from time to time, but it's just there. And you haven't called a contractor to actually come and just make that into a brick wall. And then the one day the attacker decides to go through that door, reducing your attack surface, hardening your infrastructure, ensures that attackers are not finding easy ways to pop in and out of your network. So these are the different aspects of hardening your network can be interfaces. This is from a network perspective. Do you have ways into your network? Do you have openings into your network that can allow an attacker to basically get in? One of the main things is when we talk about a physical network, do you have ports that don't have port security? Is the port on just because you're just like, okay, one day maybe somebody want to connect the system right there. So I don't have to get called in. I might as well just leave the port on. The guy that's going to plug into it may be a malicious actor like, okay, this thing just worked. I have in my career, I had been to organizations where you just plugged a laptop into a port on the wall and you pull an IP address and you're just like, this is crazy. This is like I literally am a part of your network right now. Though things like that is reducing the attack surface, hardening your network. Turn that type of stuff off. If you don't need that Xbox tool on your brand new Windows laptop that you bought, delete it. Remove the software. It may not get updated. You'll never use it. Don't have the idea that says like, well, we're gonna leave this here because maybe in 15 years somebody may have a use case for it. Okay, well, when that time arises, tell them to re-download it. We're gonna remove that right now. Another big one is accounts. When you talked about hardening networks, people leave organizations. When people leave organizations, does their credential still allow them to gain access to certain resources they should not gain? If we look back at the Colonial Pipeline incident, that incident occurred off of an employee's credentials that no longer work there that were published on a forum, a threat feed. Well, I wouldn't call it a threat feed because it was not helping people. They were published maliciously, and someone attempted to use those credentials using a deprecated service that was still running on the network. So they basically had an account that should have been deactivated and a service that should have been removed. And that's how they gained access to it. They just didn't have any type of hygiene. Someone just used an old account and an old service and got into the network. Remove it if you're not using it. If someone leaves, at the minimum, disable their account. The day they leave, if someone goes on vacation for let's say we have maternity leave with people like families, there's nothing wrong with disabling his account while he or her is on leave. There's nothing wrong with that. When he comes back, we enable it again. We just don't want these credentials to be allowed to be used across different sources or different resources that we use in order to conduct our business. Those are kind of the main ones that I see that I have seen most of my career. There are a lot of other ones. So persistent storage is another big one. Like for some reason, organizations do like to just hold on to data. They have no use case. That's where you put in a data retention policy, administrative control to say if we have no use case for this data, if it is not required for us to be held by law, delete it. Don't just hold on to customer data because in 10 years, when someone exploits that server, it takes all that data that you didn't even have a use case for, and now you're sitting in a courtroom trying to figure out why you even held on to it. So we have best practice hardening configurations. So these can be, so the example they have here is basically is implementing the CIS benchmarks that we talked about earlier within an AWS environment. Yes, CIS does have cloud controls. So this is basically just different applications, different implementations that you can use to harden your environment that are created within communities and industries, so you don't have to do all the legwork of figuring out how to harden your networks. It's already done for you. So understanding configuration baselines. So they brought up CIS again. The best way to look at configuration baselines is if you have what's called a golden image, you have a perfect piece of operating system, you have a perfect image that you are using across your organization. That is your configuration baseline. Everything is secure. You take this baseline, and what a lot of organizations do is they have that perfect image and they literally just try to just beat it up, just pin test it, kick it through the door. They just try to destroy this thing. And once they cannot get any type of access after they've done all this extra stuff to it, they create, and it also does allow them to conduct their business operations and achieve their business goals. that it becomes the configuration baseline. All the applications are configured properly, everything is patched, everything's updated, everything works, it is a part of the domain, everything talks. That is your configuration baseline. So there are certain controls that you will kind of go through to ensure that you have achieved a perfect configuration baseline. And some of those controls are released by the Center for Information Security. Uh, Baselines are very important. Within the DoD, with I've experienced, they call it the secure host baseline. It's constantly updated. It's basically if you want to have a system on a DoD network, you will start with this baseline that we will give you, and you will add things that you need to it, and then we will revalidate that it is still secure, and then that will be your system. If someone wants to add something to it, change management board, we need to figure out if this is actually necessary first, and then how can we make it secure, and if we are accepting risk by putting this on here. Having that secure baseline will almost essentially help you in ensuring that you are starting from a hardened network from the inception. With the DoD secure baseline that I was speaking of, we also have DoD STIGs. DoD STIGs don't just apply to operating systems. They are the security technical implementation guides. This is something that if you get a job within the DoD and you are re-imaging systems, you are maintaining systems, you're securing systems, this will be your best friend. This will be what will keep you out of the commander's office, ensuring that you are going by the technical guidelines that are already put in place, that are vetted to ensure that the standard base is fine. If something does occur, then maybe it's something that we need to add to it, but you have to start from a more secure original standpoint. Anything outside of that, you probably do not want to implement if you enjoy your job. We call it when people used to do things that were not in accordance with a DoD STIG or a DISA STIG. We used to call those resume generating events. When someone says, "Hey, let me try this," we would call those an RGE. Like, oh, it's a resume generating event. You must not like working here. So this is just controls put in place to ensure that the standard baseline is secure. Anything outside of this must go through a change management board. It must be vetted and it must have a specific use case for why. Convenience is not a use case that is used in the DoD. Some organizations may allow it, but as a cybersecurity analyst, you should want to speak up to ensure that convenience is not a use case for something. So we're going to get into topic 5C. It's a pretty short topic. We're going to talk about special considerations of vulnerability scanning, kind of just tying back all the things that we have already talked about so far, and just kind of putting it together and applying it to how we would actually see it more in the wild. Special considerations for scanning. Segmentation, you want to put specific systems in specific segments. You definitely don't want what's called a flat network. That means anything can talk to anything. You want to put VLANs in place. I want my servers that are very sensitive to be in their own VLAN. I want my research and development department to be in its own VLAN. I want my human resource department to be in its own VLAN. These guys don't have to talk to each other, so why should they have access to each other without going up to the router? They should not be all hanging off the same switch and being able to just bounce traffic off each other. The reason for this, someone attacks one, that means they have the credentials to attack others, and they may have the credentials to attack the others to attack others, but they also have the access to do it because there are no VLANs in place, there's no segmentation. Also, when you're talking about vulnerability scanning, segmentation will allow you to scan certain portions of the network without affecting others. This rolls directly into performance considerations. When you're conducting your scans, you want to ensure that you are conducting them at a time. Now we're going to get into vulnerability scan scheduling, but at a time because some of the vulnerability scans based off of the type of networks you are scanning can have a performance impact on that specific device or network, which can affect business operations. If you are in certain environments, it can affect quality of life or sustainment of life. If you're working at a hospital and you want to scan the specific IoT devices that are sustaining life at the patient bedside, you may want to identify a schedule or a time to do it when there's not a patient in that room. You don't want to just blast this thing out whenever just because you want to keep the network safe. You want to align with your business operations, and kind of these are the ways that you can ensure you do it, but ensuring that your performance considerations are in place is using these specific concepts. This is also will help you talk to your senior managers as far as when and why you're doing certain things, such as scanning certain devices. And when they say why, you basically can explain like, okay, the scan we need to do here, it has a certain type of scan speed based off of that specific type of operating system, and this thing may go down, and we don't want it to go down while someone's on life support or while the summertime and the temperature is 110 degrees outside. We might not want to scan the major servers at the electricity department. This goes into scheduling, ensuring that your schedule for scanning aligns with business operations and um, business functions, and ensuring that you are not impacting business operations and business functions. We want cybersecurity to be something that is conducted on a regular basis as part of business operations, not something that prohibits business operations. Um, IPSs and IDS and firewall settings, they can actually get in the way of scans. Ensure that when you are conducting scans, if something is not coming back, there is probably a reason for that. If you are scanning something with a credential scan and you are getting nothing back, most likely um, something is wrong. And it could just be a firewall rule, or it could be an IDS that is, or it could, not an IDS. IDS is going to stop it. And it could be an IPS that's actually stopping your scan, because generally scans, especially server scans, are very aggressive, and the firewall might just turn it off and thinking it is an attacker. So you want to ensure that IP addresses from servers that do the scanning are whitelisted. You want to ensure that certain firewall controls are put in place during certain times that scans will be conducted. Just kind of thinking of the overall picture of how this scan looks at the device you're scanning and how it can respond to it, how your network is set up, and does it actually sustain what you're trying to do. So different types of some computer systems, ICS, SCADA, and operational technology. So when you think of operational technology, think of a factory. What is controlling all those arms to put those pieces together? That's operational technology. A lot of these things are run by computer networks. ICS, SCADA. So the ICS portion is the workflow and process automation. If this happens, what happens after this? If this temperature gets to this level, is this valve going to open up based off of the logic behind it? Then with the ICS, going to jump down to programmable logic controllers. That's actually the device that is doing this controlling and is allowing these actions to take place. So supervisor control and data acquisition, think of this as the brains of the whole ICS SCADA system. The ICS portion is the actual process of valves and things opening up, closing when certain things happen. The PLC is the device that is causing that to happen, and the SCADA portion is the brain of it. This is just a summary of lesson 5. We spoke about the industry regulations often drive vulnerability scanning program requirements. Vulnerability scanning can be performed using many different types of tools. Remember to diversify your security. Device configuration is often compared to established security baselines. This was that golden image I spoke about. Scanning must be performed carefully to avoid business interruptions. When it comes to business interruptions, you want to look at the goals of your organization and anything that can be subsequent to your scan. What are you scanning? What are those devices doing, and when are they doing it? Operational technology is specialized equipment that's particularly sensitive to disruptions. You may not want to start messing with the electrical grid during a heat spike or a hurricane or something like that. You might not want to scan your network for attacks during a hurricane just because of the operational outcome of that activity.